The stadium pulsed with life, a sea of fans clad in team colors roaring with excitement. The championship game was about to begin, and the energy was electric. Families huddled together, sharing snacks and laughs, while groups of friends waved banners and sang chants in unison. The air was thick with the mingling scents of popcorn, hot dogs, and fresh pretzels. High above the action, in a glass-walled VIP box, Donald Trump sat with his team, his gaze scanning the packed arena below. He wore a tailored navy suit and his signature red tie, leaning back comfortably in his chair. Though he appeared relaxed, he exuded a quiet authority, his presence drawing occasional glances from nearby spectators. Trump sipped his water, nodding occasionally as his aides discussed the event's significance. Yet his attention remained on the crowd. He had always enjoyed the communal spirit of games like these, the way people from all walks of life came together for a shared passion, but not all was harmonious in the lower sections of the stadium. Near the halfway line, Marcus and Tanya sat side by side, their hands clasped as they waited for the game to begin. Marcus wore a modest team jacket, and Tanya's bright yellow sweater stood out against the dark sea of jerseys. They smiled, exchanging quiet words, oblivious to the trouble brewing nearby. A man a few rows back, clearly intoxicated, leaned forward. His face was flushed, his words slurred but loud enough to carry. "Hey, you two," he barked, his voice cutting through the buzz of anticipation. "You sure you're in the right place?" Marcus turned, startled but composed. "We're here for the game, same as you," he replied calmly. The man sneered, taking a swig from his drink. "Your kind doesn't belong in seats like these. Why don't you go back to the nosebleeds?" The woman pointed to the man and stuttered with fear. Nearby fans shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, unwilling to get involved. Others exchanged uneasy glances, their faces etched with disapproval but no action. The atmosphere around them grew tense, the joyous energy dimming like a light bulb on its last spark. "I one piano Taurus. Ilan piano Taurus." Tanya squeezed Marcus's hand, her eyes narrowing. "Let it go," she whispered. Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. He turned back to the field, trying to focus on the game, but the man wasn't finished. "You think you're better than us?" the man continued, his voice louder now. "Sitting here like you own the place?" A hush began to ripple through the crowd. A few fans recorded the scene on their phones, their faces a mix of curiosity and disgust. Well, I'm just practicing today, making sure broken bands stay back when people take the bull by the horns." Marcus turned back, his voice firm but steady. "I don't want any trouble. Just let us enjoy the game." The man laughed bitterly. "Trouble? I'll show you trouble," he barked, leaning closer as though daring Marcus to respond. Writing. In the VIP box, Trump's gaze fell on the commotion below, his brow furrowed, his posture straightening as he watched the scene unfold. The noise from the section reached even his elevated seat. "How is it, Storit, being here in Wayne?" Rexton asked the deputy director of antitrust at the desk. His gray eyes fawned on the chaos below. In the VIP box, Trump's gaze fell on the commotion below. His body tightened with fear as he waited to respond to what happened next. "What's going on down there?" he asked, his tone sharp. An aide leaned over, pointing toward the disturbance. "Looks like an argument, sir. Security should be handling it soon." Trump didn't respond immediately. His sharp eyes stayed fixed on the aggressor and the young couple. He saw Marcus's calm restraint, Tanya's quiet courage, and the man's escalating belligerence. Finally, he rose from his seat, his decision made. "No one should have to face this," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of resolve. "Let's go." "I want to see what's here," Chris said. The other three, including PT, climbed into the car. With that, he exited the VIP box, heading toward the heart of the conflict. Trump stood at the edge of the VIP box, his eyes fixed on the growing commotion below. The hostile tone of the aggressor's voice carried through the stadium, slicing through the celebratory hum of the crowd. Fans in the surrounding seats shifted uncomfortably, their murmurs rising like static in the charged air. Trump's jaw tightened. He could see the man, red-faced and belligerent, leaning into Marcus and Tanya, who sat stiffly, their calm demeanor belying the storm brewing in their section. He had seen enough. In the parking lot, a rolling toy spun off the back of a Landcopper. Marcus grabbed the toy from Tanya. Without a word, Trump turned to his team. "I'm going down there," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "Sir," one aide began, "secure—" "No time for that," Trump cut him off, already moving toward the exit. "This needs to be handled now." As Trump descended the stairs, his unmistakable presence caught the attention of the crowd. People nudged one another, their whispers blending with the rustling of jackets and the click of phone cameras. "Is that Trump?" someone murmured. Yeah, it's him." The tension seemed to follow him down the steps, his measured pace adding to the gravity of the moment. When he reached the section, the aggressor was mid-rant, gesturing wildly at Marcus and Tanya. "You people always think you're entitled," the man spat, his words slurring slightly from alcohol. "You don't belong here." Trump stepped into the aisle, his commanding voice cutting through the noise. "What's going on here?" The man turned, startled. His bravado faltered as he registered who was addressing him. For a moment, he blinked, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Trump's gaze was unyielding. "I asked you a question," he said, his tone steady but sharp. The man straightened, regaining a sliver of his earlier arrogance. "It's nothing," he said dismissively, waving a hand. "Just a misunderstanding." Marcus, still seated, shook his head. "No, it's not," he said firmly. "This man's been harassing us, calling us names, telling us we don't belong here." Tanya nodded, her voice calm but resolute. "We've done nothing wrong. We're just here to watch the game." Trump turned his attention back to the man, who shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "Is that true?" Trump asked, his voice low but heavy with authority. Trump raised an eyebrow and called to the man, who shook his head. The man bristled, his bravado returning in a desperate attempt to save face. "I didn't mean anything by it," he said, his tone defensive. "I'm just saying, people like them." Trump held up a hand, silencing him. "Stop right there," he said. The crowd fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. "There's no room for racism here or anywhere," Trump said firmly, his voice carrying across the section. "We're better than this. As Americans, we stand together, not tear each other down." That whole moment is just like not usually political, and it's like a dogfight between... The man tried to interject, but Trump's raised hand stopped him again. "Your words don't just hurt Marcus and Tanya," he continued. "They hurt everyone here. Everyone who believes in decency, respect, and unity." The crowd watched, captivated. Even those who had initially hesitated to get involved now leaned forward, their phones held steady to capture every word. Security arrived, two uniformed officers stepping into the aisle. They approached the aggressor, their movements firm but non-confrontational. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave," one of them said. The man's face turned crimson. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "I didn't do anything wrong." Trump met his gaze, unflinching. "You've done enough," he said simply. The officers escorted the man out, his protests fading into the distance. As he disappeared from view, the crowd erupted in applause. Cheers rang out, reverberating through the stadium like a wave of relief and solidarity. Saramayo followed close behind. A moment earlier, both brothers had looked sheepish. Marcus stood, turning to Trump, his eyes glistening with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do that." Trump extended a hand, shaking Marcus's firmly. "Yes, I did," he replied. "No one should have to go through that. Not here. Not anywhere." Seriously?" Wani cut in. Tanya stepped forward, her voice quiet but sincere. It means a lot, she said. More than you know. Trump gave a small nod, his expression softening. You both handled yourselves with grace, he said. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. The crowd, still clapping and cheering, began chanting, Unity! Unity! The words spread like wildfire, filling the stadium with a sense of collective purpose. Trump turned, addressing the crowd briefly before heading back to the VIP box. This isn't just about today, he said. It's about who we are and who we choose to be. Let's choose respect. Let's choose unity. As he ascended the stairs, the crowd roared their approval. For Marcus and Tanya, the moment was transformative. A reminder that even in the face of prejudice, there were people willing to stand up for what was right. As the aggressor was escorted out of the stadium, the tension that had gripped the crowd began to lift. For a moment, the section was quiet, the collective energy suspended like a held breath. Then, a ripple of applause began, tentative at first, then building into a thunderous ovation. Unity! Unity! Someone shouted, and within seconds, the chant spread through the stands like wildfire. The sound swelled, voices joining in unison, reverberating through the massive arena. It wasn't just a reaction to what had happened. It was a declaration of who they wanted to be. Marcus and Tanya stood at their seats, momentarily overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Fans from nearby rows approached them, offering words of encouragement and apology. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, an older woman said, her voice quivering with emotion. You didn't deserve it. None of us should stand for that. A younger man in a team jersey extended his hand to Marcus. I've been through something similar, he admitted, his eyes downcast. It's not easy, but the way you handled yourself, that was inspiring. Tanya, her composure steady, thanked each person who came forward, her words carrying the warmth of someone who understood the power of solidarity. It means a lot, she said, more than you know. Meanwhile, Trump remained in the aisle, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Their response was overwhelming, but his focus was clear. He raised a hand, and the chants gradually subsided, the crowd eager to hear what he had to say. One of the stadium staff handed Trump a microphone, and he turned to face the sea of fans. His voice, calm and steady, carried easily over the hushed arena. This isn't just about one moment or one person, he began. What happened here today is a reminder of what happens when we allow hate to take root. It divides us, it weakens us. But when we stand together, when we speak out against injustice, we're stronger than ever. The crowd erupted in cheers, their applause echoing his sentiment. Trump continued, his tone growing more resolute. We live in a country built on diversity. Different backgrounds, different stories, different dreams. But united by the same values of respect and dignity, that's what makes us strong. And when we forget that, we lose a piece of what makes us great. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the crowd. We can't let hate win. Not here. Not anywhere. Because we're stronger when we stand together, and weaker when we allow hate to divide us. He glanced back at me, a low, sad smile on his face. The stadium erupted again, the cheers louder this time. Fans stood, clapping and hollering, their energy renewed by his words. In the stands, Marcus and Tanya exchanged a glance. It was a look of quiet understanding, a shared acknowledgement that this moment was bigger than them. Since Marcus was backing her, she decided to support him and put her arm around his neck. They stepped out on stage once more. The mood in the stadium shifted palpably. The earlier heaviness had been replaced by something brighter, something hopeful. Fans began to cheer, not just for their teams, but for one another. Strangers exchanged high fives and smiles, the atmosphere charged with a renewed sense of togetherness. Troy finished downloading, and he called his parents to let them know that he was in the village. Oh, wow, I noticed the football stadium, Jordan said, looking at his phone. As the game resumed, the energy on the field mirrored the newfound unity in the crowd. Players seemed invigorated, feeding off the audience's positivity. Spectators who had initially come for the competition now found themselves part of something much larger, a collective desire for change and a commitment to be better. Throughout the game, the incident remained a topic of conversation. Fans leaned over to talk to one another, sharing their own stories of overcoming prejudice. A group of teenagers nearby discussed how they'd seen similar situations in their schools and how today's events made them feel hopeful for the future. By halftime, the story had already spread beyond the stadium. Social media buzzed with clips of the confrontation and Trump's speech. Fans who had been present shared their perspectives, describing the powerful shift they'd felt in the crowd. Instead of going inside, Trump just sat in his stall. This wasn't just a game anymore, one tweet read. It was a moment that reminded us of what we can achieve when we stand up for what's right. In the VIP box, Trump sat down again, his expression contemplative as he watched the game unfold. His phone buzzed with notifications, messages from staff, reporters, and acquaintances who had seen the viral videos. He ignored them for now, choosing instead to focus on the crowd's energy. Saldisad, leba mi jete aptosi trocucci. It was like a fucking... The game ended with a dramatic finish. The winning team celebrated in a flurry of cheers and confetti. But for many in the audience, the real victory had already happened in the stands. I'll say this much, that Alex Connor he was in. As fans began to file out of the stadium, a woman stopped by Marcus and Tanya's seats. "You're brave," she said simply, her words weighted with admiration. "And you're not alone." Marcus smiled, his grip on Tanya's hand tightening. "Neither are you," he replied. "She shall be." For everyone who had witnessed the incident, the takeaway was clear. Moments of courage and compassion could transform not just individuals, but entire communities. The moment the videos hit social media, they exploded across timelines and news feeds like wildfire. Clips captured Trump descending the stadium stairs with purpose, the tense exchange with the aggressor, and the roaring applause that followed his firm declaration, "There's no room for racism here or anywhere." Within hours, hashtags like hashtag Trump against racism, hashtag unity at the stadium, and hashtag stand with Marcus were trending globally. Millions of users watched the footage, sharing it with captions ranging from expressions of admiration to calls for broader change. One video, posted by a fan who had been just a few rows away from the incident, became the most viral. The caption read, "Say what you want, but this was leadership in action. We need more of this." It racked up over 5 million views within the first day. Reactions poured in from all corners of the internet. Celebrities, activists, and politicians chimed in, amplifying the message. "This is how you lead," tweeted one prominent civil rights advocate. Another user commented, "This moment gives me hope that people can still step up when it matters most." But not everyone was convinced. Critics questioned Trump's motives, with some arguing that it was a calculated move to rehabilitate his image. "Is this really about racism or just a publicity stunt?" one post read. Others brought up his past statements and policies, reigniting debates about his track record on racial issues. For example, the division was stark. On one hand, supporters hailed it as a defining moment of leadership. On the other, detractors saw it as an opportunistic spectacle. Yet amidst the polarized opinions, one sentiment was undeniable. The incident had struck a chord, sparking conversations that could no longer be ignored. Amid the online storm, Marcus and Tanya found themselves at the center of national attention. News outlets reached out, eager to hear their side of the story. In a widely viewed interview, Marcus sat beside Tanya, his hands clasped tightly as he spoke. "It's hard to explain how it feels to be singled out like that," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "We were just there to enjoy a game, to be told we didn't belong. It was painful." Tanya nodded, adding, "We've faced things like this before, but this time someone stood up for us. Mr. Trump didn't have to get involved, but he did, and that meant everything." The interviewer leaned in. "What would you say to people who are inspired by your story but unsure how to take action in their own lives. Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. I'd say this: don't wait for someone else to step up. If you see something wrong, say something. We need allies in this fight, people who aren't afraid to use their voice, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. The couple's words resonated deeply, their interview sparking further discussions about the role of bystanders in addressing discrimination. Many viewers took to social media sharing their own stories of intervention or regret for staying silent. The ripple effect extended far beyond the stadium. Schools, workplaces, and community centers began hosting discussions about how to create more inclusive spaces. Talk shows featured panels of experts debating the broader implications of the incident. What happened at the stadium isn't unique, one sociologist explained during a primetime segment. What's unique is how it was handled. That level of intervention, especially from someone as high profile as Trump, sends a powerful message. Local governments and organizations also took note. Some announced plans to implement anti-discrimination training for public spaces inspired by the viral moment. A coalition of sports arenas pledged to adopt zero-tolerance policies for harassment, ensuring swift action in future incidents. So, Rickle, I'm just... On social media, users started sharing practical advice for addressing racism in real time. Posts like how to be an ally at public events and 5 ways to stand up against discrimination gained traction, their reach amplified by influencers and activists. The dialogue wasn't limited to large platforms. At the grassroots level, communities organized town hall meetings and workshops to discuss how they could foster inclusivity in everyday life. For Marcus and Tanya, watching the wave of change was both humbling and hopeful. It's strange, Marcus admitted during a follow-up interview. We didn't ask to be in the spotlight, but if our experience can help even one person feel less alone, it's worth it. Amid the flurry of media coverage, Trump addressed the incident during a press briefing. Standing at the podium, his expression was serious but composed. So, this isn't about politics, he began, his voice steady. It's about basic humanity. What happened at the stadium was wrong, plain and simple. And it's not an isolated incident. It's something that happens far too often, in too many places. He paused, scanning the room before continuing. We have a choice. We can turn a blind eye, or we can take a stand. I chose to act because I believe in the power of unity. Racism has no place in our country, and it's on all of us to make that clear. I didn't mean to sound like... The statement, though brief, struck a chord with many. Critics and supporters alike acknowledged its sincerity, even as debates about his broader record continued. For Trump, the moment was less about public perception and more about setting a precedent. Leadership isn't just about policy, he later told an aide. It's about showing people what's right, especially when it's hard. By the end of the week, the incident had evolved into more than just a viral moment. It had become a catalyst for change. Online, the hashtags continued to trend, sparking campaigns aimed at promoting inclusivity in sports and beyond. Advocacy groups used the momentum to fundraise for anti-discrimination initiatives, while individuals shared stories of how the stadium incident inspired them to take action in their own lives. At its core, the ripple effect was a testament to the power of one moment to ignite meaningful conversations. From social media threads to boardroom discussions, the call for unity echoed loud and clear. And for Marcus and Tanya, the experience reaffirmed a simple truth. When people stand together, even the darkest moments can give way to hope. The stadium, once a symbol of unity through sports, had become a focal point for a larger conversation about justice and respect. In the days following the incident, its management faced mounting pressure to respond decisively. Fans, community leaders, and even corporate sponsors called for no one else would have to endure what Marcus and Tanya had experienced. Determined to rebuild trust, the stadium management team convened an emergency meeting. Richard Carr, the stadium's director, addressed his staff with a mix of resolve and regret. "What happened here was unacceptable," he began, his voice firm but measured. "We can't undo the past, but we can make sure our future reflects the values we stand for." The first step was the introduction of a comprehensive anti-discrimination policy. It outlined a zero-tolerance stance on harassment with clear consequences for violations, whether it's in the stands, at the concession counters, or behind the scenes, Richard explained in a public statement. "Every individual in this stadium will be treated with respect, or they won't be welcome here." To support this policy, mandatory sensitivity training was rolled out for all employees. From ushers to security guards to vendors, every member of the team would undergo workshops designed to help them recognize, address, and prevent discriminatory behavior. The sessions, led by experts in racial equity, focused on building empathy and fostering a culture of inclusivity. And additionally, the management introduced a new hotline for reporting incidents during events. The hotline was staffed by trained professionals who could respond to reports of harassment or discrimination in real time, ensuring that issues were addressed swiftly and effectively. Posters advertising the hotline were placed throughout the stadium, accompanied by the slogan, "See something, say something. Together, we can make this a space for everyone." But the changes didn't stop there. Recognizing that policies alone wouldn't shift the culture, the stadium sought partnerships with advocacy groups specializing in racial equality. These organizations brought not only their expertise, but also their deep connections to the community, ensuring that the changes were both impactful and sustainable. One of the first collaborations was with a nonprofit focused on racial justice in sports. Together, they organized a series of workshops for fans, designed to educate attendees on the importance of inclusion and the role of bystanders in addressing discrimination. The workshops were held in the stadium's conference rooms before games, and participation surged as word spread about the initiative. The stadium also launched a community outreach program, hosting events that brought together fans, players, and activists to discuss ways to create more inclusive public spaces. One of the most popular events featured a panel discussion with Marcus and Tanya, who shared their story alongside athletes and community leaders. "We want this stadium to be more than just a venue for games," Richard said at the event. "We want it to be a place where everyone feels they belong, where the values of respect and unity are as central as the game itself." The fans embraced these efforts wholeheartedly. Social media was flooded with photos and videos from the workshops and events, tagged with captions like, "Learning to be better together." Families brought their children to the discussions, viewing them as opportunities to teach the next generation about empathy and justice. Players also lent their voices to the cause. Several posted videos on their platforms encouraging fans to participate in the initiatives. "The game is for everyone," one-star athlete said in a video that went viral. "Let's make sure our stadium reflects that." Self-plexing to get the attention of his heaving coach, another wrote. Slowly but surely, the atmosphere at the stadium began to change. Fans reported feeling a renewed sense of safety and camaraderie. Employees noted a shift in their own interactions, with many expressing gratitude for the training sessions that had opened their eyes to unconscious biases. Marcus and Tanya continued to play a central role in these efforts, working closely with the stadium and its partners. Marcus often spoke at the workshops, sharing his perspective and encouraging others to take action in their own lives. Tanya helped organize events, ensuring that they were accessible and engaging for fans of all ages. Together, they became powerful advocates for the idea that sports could be more than just entertainment. They could be a force for good. By the time the next championship rolled around, the stadium had transformed. Fans walked through its gates not just as spectators, but as participants in a larger movement toward unity and respect. And while the echoes of the incident that started it all still lingered, they served as a reminder of how far the community had come. Tresoy and Johnny Altman had what I think they most respect for. They left for the gym, hit their workout, were in the back of the locker room. The ripple effect of the changes extended far beyond the stadium walls, inspiring other venues to adopt similar initiatives. For Marcus, Tanya, and everyone involved, it was proof that, even in the face of adversity, progress was possible when people stood together. In the weeks following the stadium incident, Marcus found himself reflecting deeply on what had transpired. What had started as an evening of enjoyment had spiraled into an ugly confrontation, only to transform into a powerful moment of unity and change. For Marcus, the experience was both humbling and motivating. Sitting at the dining table in his modest apartment, he flipped through a notebook filled with scribbled thoughts and ideas. The events at the stadium had sparked something in him, a sense of responsibility, a drive to ensure no one else would have to endure the kind of humiliation he and Tanya faced. Whereas the police were in ongoing apprehension, he kept trying to get his life together until something took him in the wrong direction. Tell me more about your dad. Tanya entered the room, setting down a steaming mug of coffee in front of him. Still thinking about it? She asked gently. Marcus nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Yeah, I keep wondering what more I can do. Tanya placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You've already done so much by standing tall that night. But if you want to do more, I'll be right here with you. Her words were the catalyst he needed. That evening, Marcus drafted a plan. He wouldn't just tell his story, he would use it as a platform to inspire action. He began small, accepting invitations from local schools and community centers to speak about the importance of standing up against discrimination. Standing before classrooms of eager students and halls packed with attentive listeners, Marcus shared his experience with raw honesty. It's not easy to speak up, he admitted during one of his first talks. But when you do, it changes everything. Not just for you, but for the people watching. Courage is contagious. As his confidence grew, so did the scope of his outreach. Marcus started addressing workplaces, helping companies understand the impact of creating inclusive environments. He became a regular at diversity and inclusion workshops, sharing personal anecdotes that left his audiences deeply moved. One afternoon, Marcus received an unexpected call. It was Trump. I've been keeping an eye on what you're doing, Trump said, his tone direct but warm. It's impressive. You've got a voice people want to hear. He read Herman and sighed. Trump said, running a hand through his hair, and then pulled his helmet from his head. Trump said, Amtivor, I also play Hermes, with golden tail. His helmet rested protectively on his head. Thank you, Marcus replied, his gratitude genuine. I want to help, Trump continued. There are people you need to meet, leaders who can amplify what you're doing. This isn't a one-man fight, Marcus. You've got allies out there. True to his word, Trump connected Marcus with influential leaders in civil rights, education, and business. These introductions opened doors Marcus had never imagined, allowing him to collaborate with organizations dedicated to promoting unity and respect. Through these partnerships, Marcus helped design campaigns that reached millions. One initiative, called Together We Stand, encouraged individuals to share stories of allyship and inclusion, creating a digital tapestry of hope and resilience. Traveling across the country, Marcus spoke at conferences and rallies, each time drawing larger crowds. His message was simple yet profound. The fight against discrimination isn't just about confronting hate. It's about building bridges, one conversation, one act of kindness at a time. His authenticity resonated deeply. Unlike polished speakers with rehearsed lines, Marcus's words carried the weight of lived experience. He didn't shy away from discussing his own vulnerabilities, acknowledging the moments when fear almost held him back. But I've learned something important, he told an audience at a university event. Courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you act despite the fear. And every time you do, you make it a little easier for the next person to do the same. And Marcus's impact grew steadily. He became a sought-after voice in the movement for inclusivity. His story featured in newspapers, podcasts, and documentaries. Schools began incorporating his talks into their anti-bullying programs, while businesses invited him to lead training sessions for their teams. Despite his rising profile, Marcus remained grounded. Tanya was his constant anchor, ensuring that even as his schedule grew hectic, he never lost sight of why he had started this journey. One evening, Marcus found himself back at the stadium where it all began. He stood on the field, gazing up at the rows of seats that had once been filled with cheering fans. Now, they were occupied by hundreds of attendees for a special event, a community gathering to celebrate unity and inclusion. As Marcus stepped up to the microphone, he took a moment to absorb the scene. The same stadium that had been a site of pain and confrontation was now a space for hope and progress. "This is where my journey started," he began, his voice steady. "Not by choice, but by necessity. What happened here was painful, but it also reminded me of something important. Change is possible. It starts small, but it grows when we come together." The crowd erupted into applause, their faces reflecting the power of his words. After the event, Trump approached Marcus with a firm handshake. "You've done something incredible here," he said. Marcus smiled, his voice quiet but resolute. "I couldn't have done it alone. None of us can." In the months that followed, Marcus's work continued to inspire countless others. Communities across the country started their own initiatives, drawing from his story as a blueprint for action. For Marcus, the transformation was personal and profound. What began as a moment of pain had become a lifetime of purpose, proving that even in the darkest moments, there is always a chance to create light. As the evening sky turned shades of deep amber and violet, Donald Trump sat quietly in his office, reflecting on the events that had unfolded weeks earlier. The stadium incident had been unplanned, unexpected, yet profoundly significant. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the city lights beyond the window, replaying the moment in his mind. "I could have stayed in the box," he thought. "I could have let security handle it. But some moments demand more." The image of Marcus and Tanya, holding their ground with dignity amidst the harassment, stayed with him. He admired their composure, their quiet courage in the face of blatant injustice. Trump had seen many challenges in his life, but this was different. It wasn't about deals or negotiations. It was about humanity. We all have a role to play in shaping the future," he murmured to himself, the words firm in his mind. He thought about the key lesson he'd drawn from the incident. Courage isn't a choice. It's a necessity when injustice rears its head. He made a note in his planner to ensure his foundation continued funding initiatives that supported unity and inclusion. This was bigger than any one person. It was a movement. Meanwhile, Marcus stood at the center of a crowded community hall, addressing an audience of eager faces. The event was packed, with people spilling into the aisles, drawn by his story and the hope he represented. The room buzzed with quiet anticipation as Marcus stepped up to the podium. "Because I want to elevate," Marcus said, offering his hand in welcoming. He paused, taking in the sea of faces. His voice, steady but resonant, filled the hall. "What happened that day was painful," he began. "It was something no one should have to experience. But it also reminded me of something important." The audience leaned in, their attention riveted. "It reminded me that change is possible. It reminded me that when people come together, when we stand up for what's right, we can turn even the darkest moments into opportunities for growth." Applause erupted, but Marcus raised a hand, gently asking for quiet. "I'm not here just to tell you my story," he continued. "I'm here to ask you to tell yours, to speak up when you see something wrong, to be the ally someone needs, because every voice matters, every action counts. Punctuated by a scream and then a nodding head sign by Marcus as he was telling the story. In the back of the hall, Tanya watched with pride. She had been by Marcus's side every step of the way, and seeing him inspire others filled her heart with hope. As the event drew to a close, Marcus left the crowd with one final thought. Discrimination divides us, but courage and compassion bring us together. Let's build a world where everyone feels they belong. The audience stood, clapping and cheering, some even wiping away tears. The energy in the room was palpable, a testament to the power of one person's willingness to transform pain into purpose. Later that night, Trump and Marcus crossed paths again at a private dinner for community leaders. Trump approached Marcus with a firm handshake. "You've made an impact," he said simply. Marcus smiled. "So have you." As they spoke, the moment felt less like an ending and more like a beginning, a commitment to continue the work that had started in that stadium. This story, now shared across the nation, became a symbol of what could happen when people chose unity over division. It wasn't just about one incident, it was about the legacy it left behind. A world where courage replaced complacency. A world where compassion triumphed over hate. A world where everyone, no matter who they were, could find a place to belong. Those are compelling qualities to drop